Good morning. This is Rebecca Smith-Aldridge, the Mid-Hudson Coordinator for Library Sustainability, and I'd like to welcome you to the kickoff of our Mid-Hudson Library System's Engage webinar series. This is a series that's been in the planning for close to 6 months, thanks to many of the library directors in our system. This is a hot topic both in the Mid-Hudson Library System and around the world when it comes to the future of libraries, and we're thrilled to have a chance to start this conversation in the Mid-Hudson Library System. We always think it's great when you can learn from your peers, and that's the idea behind the webinar series. So this morning we're going to do an introduction to what is community engagement. There's a lot of theories on what that is and what it looks like. So we're going to dig into that a little bit before you get a preview of the entire webinar series. So in Mid-Hudson, we actually have a pretty robust history of taking a look at what users really are looking for in our libraries. We've got projects going back close to a decade looking at how to match up what your programs are and what you're circulating in your library and how you win your votes and making sure that people want what you have to offer. It's been a very library-centric approach to making sure libraries are doing what people want. And in a way, it's kind of reactive. And what we're going to talk about today is how community engagement is a mindset that is a proactive mindset that will build support for your library as well as make your community a pretty awesome place to be. So while we've got a history of working with our communities and working with patrons in a variety of different ways, what we're talking about today is bigger. It's much bigger, and it's a little bit different than the way we've been doing things in the past. So again, thank you so much for joining us as we move forward into the future, this brave new world using community engagement as our compass. Another thing you might be thinking about when it comes to community engagement are some opportunities that you have to engage with the community coming up. This is another thing people frequently say, oh, I engage with my community during these types of events. We've got Library Card Sign-Up Month coming up in September. We've got National Voter Registration Day and Small Business Day coming up after Thanksgiving. These are all opportunities to engage with your community, but don't necessarily sum up what community engagement actually looks like and how you do it. So that's what we're going to focus on this morning. What does community engagement actually mean in this shared vocabulary we need to have as we move forward? How are you actually going to be doing community engagement now into the future with some of the new tools that are available to us thanks to the American Library Association and the Public Library Association? And what does it look like in real life? We all sit through webinars where we watch major urban libraries do amazing things with a large amount of staff and a large budget. But here in the Mid-Hudson Library System, we've got some smaller libraries, mighty but powerful libraries, who do things in unique ways. So we're going to introduce 4 of your peers in the Mid-Hudson Library System and take a look at how they are doing things as they're moving forward into the future. And they're already having early wins and big successes that we can all learn from. So that's why we're pretty excited about this webinar series. So you'll have a chance to get that front row seat to the stories of the libraries that are your neighbors. So we've been having fun with all the different terms that are out there. Maybe seeing people getting confused about the difference between community engagement, civic engagement. You may have seen a call to action last week asking for examples of civic engagement, and it was clear people think it all falls under the umbrella of community engagement, and that might be because it does all fall under the umbrella of community engagement. Many of these things are activities that happen to help you more fully engage and participate with your community, but we really want to focus on the phrase community engagement because this is really the thing that's going to matter the most as you're moving forward, as your mindset, as you move forward. So this is the definition we're going to use, that community engagement is about participating with others to make your community a better place. This might be through a shared common cause. In fact, it needs to be through a shared common cause. It's going to be through civic participation and library services that support the common cause in the community and the advocating civic participation. So it's not about the library services making these things happen. It's about your community's need to move forward in a specific way that your services will respond to. We don't drive the ship that's actually the USS community engagement. We're actually the ones supporting it and propelling it using the talent and expertise of everyone in our community to make good things happen. So this is kind of a different way of thinking about the future of libraries, and a different way to do not only library planning, but just everyday library stuff. That it's not about us, it's about our community, and they're going to be at the center of everything we do. So we pay a lot of lip service to that, but in practice, do we actually do that? It seems overwhelming sometimes. So what we're going to take a look at is how we could break that down into finer steps that make it more obvious where we're actually engaging with our communities and where we're maybe not as engaged, but it might be a useful step towards engaging with our communities. And if that sounds confusing, don't worry, we're going to break it down. We're going to take a look at this from the inside out, because I think it's easiest to take a look at what we think community engagement is in our libraries and then really grow that vision to the bigger issue that we've got in hands, which was how do our libraries empower communities to move forward in positive ways that benefit a maximum number of people. So we've actually borrowed a model here from a pretty cool organization, the International Association for Public Participation. And they're actually extremely focused on shared decision-making in communities, which really builds buy-in and actually means things happen because everyone understands why you're going in a certain direction and wants to be going in that direction, or at least feels like the direction we're going in is a benefit to the maximum number of people in the community, if not to them as individuals. They understand why they're doing that. And it was interesting to me in learning about this model, how the actual steps that you see here, well, it might be a continuum of some kind, a spectrum, if you will. If you walk yourself through this and master some of these basic things, it gives you a great foundation for the really big work that has to be done, which is engaging with your community. If you take a look at the left there, the inform, you can see that's really a low level of public engagement where you're just pushing information out to people. So when we ask libraries for examples of public engagement and they tell us that they do an annual report to the community, that's not necessarily engaging with your community. It's informing your community about information, probably about your library and the services that you have to offer. The next step up there is consulting with your library. And we're going to take a look at examples of each of these types of things. But you can see that means that it's not you pushing information, but it's about you pulling information from your community. And then moving up to that mid-level of public engagement, you're actually getting involved in conversations with your community, possibly about the library, but hopefully about things much bigger than the library. Next step up, we've got collaborate, which is where you're actually starting to problem solve with your community. Again, many libraries use this step to collaborate about solutions for the library, but the model of community engagement we want to talk about today is about collaborating with the community to find solutions for the community. And then the highest level there is empowerment, which is the most exciting part of what we're talking about today. And we're going to take a look at how that's the pivot point for libraries when it comes to community engagement. So to break this down into the steps, we talked about inform, right? You're pushing information. That might be your website, newsletter, flyers, all that cool stuff that we call public relations. It's telling the story of the library, or it's just, really our story that we're pushing out there. That's not necessarily engaging with anyone, but it's certainly necessary. We certainly have to be talking about what the library has to offer. Then we move up to consulting. We talked about surveys, which libraries love to do. And the truth about surveys is while you might feel like you're engaging with your community, it's engaging, A, with a small part of your community, usually people who like to use the library, and also they're usually very library-centric. We just have our first example of a library who's doing an online survey that's actually about the community, not about the library, at the Garrison Library, the Desmond Fish Library down in Garrison. So it's going to be exciting to see a different use of survey, but we'll know as you hear the story of Garrison, they're going to couple that online survey with some of the things that are further up the ladder. So in terms of involvement, this is where the step we described before, where you're actually talking to the community, and let's say we're evolving this step in the new world of community engagement. In the past, libraries have used involvement to ask the community about what the library should be doing, very library-centric model of way of doing things. That word charrettes often comes up with architects who might be working on a library building and they want to, quote unquote, engage with the community about what they want in their library. But the new model is shifting that around. And we're going to take a look at this new exercise called the Ask exercise, which is really about talking to the community about the community and recognizing that they're experts in the community and you're experts in the library. So actually making sure you hear from the community about what they're experts in is going to be far more valuable to them than actually having them play a guessing game about what the library should be doing. So the Ask exercise might be something you've heard about before if you've had the pleasure of hearing Erica Freudenberger from the Red Hook Public Library talk. The Ask exercise is something from Libraries Transforming Communities, a really cool program from the American Library Association. You're going to see lots of links to this information on the new page we've created to support this webinar. But let's just take a look at these 4 questions for a second. What these questions are helping you do is have a conversation with your community about what they hope will happen in the future, what they personally feel is important in their own lives, for their own families, and hopefully what they're thinking about for the community at large. Thinking really big about what kind of community do they want to live in and what values speak to that. Why is that important to them? And then actually getting them to do some of the work of thinking about what are the steps between where we are today and where we want to go tomorrow. Not where you want to go tomorrow or where the library wants to go tomorrow, but where we as a community want to go tomorrow. And then getting them to do even more work a little bit, to think about what are some of the things that need to happen to create that kind of change. And this is the type of information that we're seeing libraries that are taking this new path of community engagement to use that information to then further explore where communities need to go and how libraries are going to be a part of getting them there, either as the people who are convening those types of conversations or who are sitting at the table and being a full partner in discussing how to create the kinds of changes that people in the community want. So that new idea of what involvement looks like is really at the beginning steps of the core of what community engagement can look like in your community. So after involvement, you see collaboration. So now you've got information and maybe you convened that conversation, or maybe your town did through a town master planning process, although I haven't seen that done that way in quite some time. Usually what we're seeing are libraries starting these conversations in the past year or two, which is really exciting to see libraries convening those types of conversations. So moving on from involved to collaborate, then starts the good work of actually figuring out how are we going to get some of this good stuff done and involving people in those decisions that are being made on their behalf. So it's not a top-down approach, but definitely a more grassroots approach to finding solutions in a community. And again, it's really not about the library so much as it is about bringing people together to talk about what the ideal state looks like in their community. And that's going to be different from community to community. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that later this morning. Now, the really cool thing about this model that we pulled out to show you, and at the heart of community engagement, is that last section there, which looks so innocuous, right? Empowerment. But really, empowerment is what libraries are all about. When you take a look at our core driving core values, the things that we spend our time on, the things we really put our heart and soul into in libraries, it's about empowering the people that we serve to have a better life through a variety of means, depending on what that person might need or that family might need. We're just broadening that pattern we've always had to make sure we're empowering as many people in our community as possible, not just those who walk through our door. Although the people who walk through our door are going to certainly benefit from the decisions that get made through a process like this as well. So this idea of empowerment in the public participation mind, when you take a look at the International Association for Public Participation, what they talk about under empowerment is empowered decision making, where people are given the authority to decide what happens next. And luckily in New York State, public libraries are actually built on that empowerment model. We have citizen boards of volunteers who come together to decide how the library is going to move forward. Most libraries in our system also have public votes on the tax levies they receive to run their library. In terms of public participation in a very traditional sense, that's certainly empowerment for people to own what happens when it comes to their library. But we're talking about elevating our ability to empower people not just to own their library or make decisions about their lives personally and for their children, but to empower entire communities to come together and make good things happen, either with the library as convener, facilitator, or supporter, but most importantly, side by side as a neighbor. And really taking a look at what does it look like to be a true neighbor in your community as a community anchor institution, which is the library. We're really well positioned to do work like this, and really we have to step up and own that role a little more than we have in the past. It's very easy to stay in our libraries and assume we know what our people want, but really getting out of our libraries to do this type of work we're seeing here is what's going to make the difference in terms of how much you're connected with your community and how well they feel you understand where we're going as a community, not where they're going or where you're going, but creating that sense of we through the activities you take in this umbrella idea of community engagement. So there's tons of good thinking in our field about what the future of libraries looks like, what some of our challenges are, but more importantly, where we see opportunities that lie in our future. And there's definitely threads, there's themes that emerge if you read all of these things. And I'm sure you've all read these and committed them to memory, but I will say I always take one for the team and try to read through all of these so we can find those points of commonality. If there's lots of smart people thinking about the same thing, let's start to draw from that and find the patterns that are going to lead to success. And what you see over and over again in all of these types of reports is that you're going to be able to be a successful library if you take the time to actually do the work, that you're not going to actually learn what to do through these types of reports and analyses and white papers and future focus from national organizations and international organizations, but they are going to tell you the path to get to what. So how you're going to figure out what's next in your community is actually the work that has to be done by every library in America and beyond. Actually taking the time to talk to your people about what's going on in your community is the #1 step to success for libraries moving forward. So while as much fun as it is to take a look at all the cool stuff that's happening in libraries today, this is not actually kind of a, pick 2 out of this list and try it out. We're not necessarily kind of incubating ideas. We're actually going to have a clearinghouse of ideas that we could draw from after we do the work of talking to our community and really finding out where they want to go. Because each of these things is pretty awesome unto itself. Things you're seeing here, top left was a really recent news story out of Houston, Texas, of a library that has a 3D printing lab that did a prosthetic arm for a little girl. Like, what an awesome story is that about harnessing technology to empower people to have affordable health care, if you will. That's a massive problem that we're all dealing with. Taking a look at the upper right there in Chicago, you've got a library that's got a little barber shop where they're doing mentoring for young men in their library. Lower left in Brooklyn, they've set up a whole video room so children can see their parents who are incarcerated, so they can have those imprints with their parents and positive interactions with parents that aren't an everyday part of their life. And then we've got the amazing little girl in the lower right from Australia who's definitely having a cool time checking out virtual reality. And this is where I think a lot of the new trendy stuff in libraries gets a bad rap, because people think that you're just slapping the what's ever new and shiny onto your library to capture people's attention. But the truth is none of these things work unless they're rooted in the work that we're talking about today. When you've taken the time to understand where people are coming from, what their heart's desire is when it comes to what they hope for their future, if your services don't align with that type of information gathering, then a lot of the stuff we try is going to fall flat. And that's actually something we learned many years ago through the Building Your Base project, which I know some of you will remember was actually designed to support getting out the vote efforts, but it was very focused on library programming. And the constant refrain we would hear from libraries who were disappointed when people would not come out to the library programs they offered. They would look fantastic, other libraries did them with great success, but they would just flop in some communities. And when libraries would diagnose what happened there, do a little forensic analysis of what went wrong, what they would normally find is they were talking to themselves, or they were kind of in a vacuum, thinking that things that would work in their community just weren't translating for the people they served. It might not be the right time, the right topic, or the right atmosphere to actually draw people in. So again, instead of guessing and throwing ideas out there and trying stuff, what we're going to be doing is transitioning into the model which really embraces community engagement and puts the community at the center of the choices we're making moving forward. One of the most, I think, obvious indicators of our success is whether or not your budget votes pass. And you're seeing the roundup from last year where we had 31 libraries go out to vote, and this was on election day. We had an awful lot of libraries going out for increases last year, and we had 100% of libraries win, which is a big day to celebrate. But the thing I always keep my eye on is yes, we're winning, but how many people are coming out to vote? And how many yes votes do you get every year? And are those numbers increasing independent of each other? If we're not seeing increases in yes votes, it's a worrisome thing, because the no votes are usually growing as more and more people feel disconnected from who libraries are and what we do. So the time is now for us to be more fully enmeshed in who our community is and what they want moving forward. Because doing this type of work will capture the attention of people who never thought the library had something they were interested in. And quite frankly, even once they learn the power of a public library, they may still not use the actual resources we have in the form of the books on our shelves or our e-collections. However, if they see the community library as a catalyst for good things beyond the four walls of what we do, that's going to win the day when it comes down to making what's really a very difficult decision for many people, which is to vote yes to tax themselves more for library services. My job is really to look at the patterns that we see throughout our system, both what's working, what's not working, and then really longitudinally over time, what makes a difference when it comes to winning your vote, making people happy, and really having an impact for those people that we serve. And one thing's become really clear to me over the years. When we take a look at the vote results, when we have losses, because certainly not every year are we able to report 100% of libraries are winning, when we look at those losses, it is very often tied to a disconnect between that library and their community. It's absolutely rare. In fact, I can't even think of one instance when losses were tied to a larger national trend or a problem we were seeing with the overall perception of libraries. It's actually a very local decision. And I think that's the focus as we're moving forward. Community engagement is about micro-local. It's about your village, your town, your city, whatever your service area is, and making sure you know that community really, really well, and you're a big, big part of it, because what we see time and time again is that local supports local. You'll see on the new webpage we've created to support this webinar series an article about local supports local and how it's tied to vibrancy in local communities that are quote unquote making a comeback. There's a story there about Asheville, North Carolina, where I took a vacation a couple of years ago. And one of the things that was made really clear through a documentary about the micro brewing trend in Asheville, North Carolina, was that the people of Asheville wanted a vibrant community. They wanted local businesses and agriculture to thrive. And so they made it happen. When people want to be in a place and want it to be vibrant and vital, they'll make it happen. They sometimes might need help organizing around making it happen, but they want to be in that place. They've chosen to live there and raise their families there or retire there, whatever their choice might have been. They want that place to be as economically viable as possible, as environmentally friendly as possible, and as social as possible, because that's really what makes up the fabric of what community is at the end of the day. So this focus on local through the techniques you can learn about community engagement is really the recipe for success for just about every library. We have a lot of diversity amongst libraries in our system when it comes to the size of the population you serve, the size of your staff, the size of your budget, the age of your building, the age of your staff, whatever your issues might be, the age of your tech. But at the heart of everything that we have to work with has to be this kernel of truth that we're there to serve the people in front of us. Our community is their library, and is that reflected as well as it can be as you move forward? That's the biggest thing to focus on when it comes to the future success of libraries. That might be my humble opinion, but it seems to be an awfully big trend amongst the library field, and you'll see tons of support for this effort as well. So I think we're probably all going in the right direction on this one. Our libraries have tons of examples of how they do this, and that's what's so exciting about this webinar series, because it really speaks to really what has become one of the most seminal reports we've seen in the past few years about the future of libraries. This is from the Aspen Institute. This is a think tank that has received quite a bit of money from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and we all know Bill and Melinda Gates. They like to invest in libraries and future solutions that really speak to education and the health of the communities that make up our world. out of this report came this phrase that has just been a mantra in most of the things I'm seeing, both in professional journals, at conferences, both local and national. This idea of being central to people, place, and platform. That libraries are focused on these 3 Ps, that we're focused on the people that we serve and making sure there's civic engagement in our communities. These are libraries that are thriving. People who understand that place is important, both place in terms of the sense of the library as place, and maybe you've heard the phrase library as third place. That's a phrase that means that everyone has a third place in their life. People go to work or school, that's maybe their first place, and they go home, actually let's say home is our first place, and then our second place might be going to work or to school, and then there should be a third place in our life to really enrich the social and cultural aspects of being a human being on this planet, and that libraries are and have been for the past decade increasingly seen as one of the smartest third places we can have in a community. So embracing that idea of placemaking, both from a cultural perspective of making sure that your community is a great place to be, but also that your library is a great destination for people to find community. If there's not other places in your community where that can happen, is that second P, place. And the third P is really exciting, and that's platform. That libraries provide a platform to make good things happen. So our platform might be our services or our space or our people. If you've read the new article in the Library Journal about the #1 library in the country for this year, which is the Topeka and Shawnee County Library out in Kansas, you're going to see a library doing super unique things, absolutely based on what their community needed, but they thought of their library as a platform to make what their community wanted to have happen. So for example, they have their staff trained as facilitators. So when a community member wants to have a meeting or the town board is having a retreat, library staff are actually facilitating community meetings because the community identified one of the things they were lacking was community meeting space, which the library happily provides, and now they have people to help run meetings that make good things happen by a variety of groups in the community. So it's not the library necessarily making those good things happening or doing the hands-on work, they're facilitating good work by other people because that's what mattered most in that community. So thinking of your library as a platform for people to springboard off of, whether it be with the resources they need that they can't afford or that they didn't know they even wanted, or research that would help them get to the next step of whatever their plan might be. The library as platform is a really fun, I think, theory to be thinking about because that can look however it needs to look for your community. There's no recipe book that says how you have to do it. It's really about shaping your services, programs, your staff's time and energy, your budget and your space to provide that platform for really good things to happen. So I'm going to just give you a little preview of one of the webinars in this series, which is again from Erica from the Red Hook Library. And she shared a quote that I think has resonated over the past year. Last year we had a program at the Mid-Hudson Library System called The Future of Programming to really help people think big about what programming at libraries is going to look like over the next few years. And she shared a quote from a colleague that really helps, I think, encompass what we're talking about here today. A lot of libraries have the tagline that they are the heart of the community. And I think a lot of what we're talking about, and you'll see Erica really well represents this in her talk, is that what we need to do is shift from thinking of ourselves as the heart of the community and making the community the heart of our libraries. And that beating heart is really what keeps our library going for the long haul. Because libraries that aren't speaking to that will have a wider rift between people in their community and thinking of the library as a relevant resources they want to continue to invest in the future. So keeping the community central at everything we do is going to be really key. And so I think that's an interesting thing for us to think about, that that's all well and good. We're going to do this great work to be engaging with our community, and we're going to be talking to them about their hopes and their dreams for the future. And then we're going to not worry about circulation statistics and program attendance. Well, how are we going to tell people we're doing a good job? So another thing we're going to have to think about as we move forward on this new path is how you measure impact in the environment of a focus on community engagement. And this is another area where you may have seen some of these things mentioned and let them, whiz right by you because you've got a lot of other things going on. But we think this might be something that we want to focus more on in the future, which is how we tell the story of measuring impact in the era of community engaged focused libraries. So if you're spending your time, energy, resources the way we think you should be in the future, which is again, community at the heart of what you're doing, maybe that looks a little different than it used to. It might mean your staff are deployed in new and interesting ways that we haven't really had to measure before to demonstrate impact to our funders, who are our stakeholders. They might be the people who volunteer their time to us, the people who vote to raise their taxes or donate to our capital campaign or our annual giving campaign. We're going to have to be able to tell that story in different ways than we have in the past. And this was a big finding that came out of the Increasing Circulation Incubator project last year at Mid-Hudson, that circulation is just one part of the story, and it really doesn't actually tell us a lot about what's going on in our libraries. It doesn't tell us how people use what they're borrowing from us, or what it means to their life, what impact it has, whether that be cultural or educational or resulting in a small business being created. We don't really have that information. These new tools that have been created by our field, coming out of the Public Library Association and funded by some pretty heavy hitters, are really targeted tools to help us measure our impact, either through the programs that we offer or the technology that we offer. And they've even taken some things a step further, like the EDGE tool, which you can learn more about on the webpage we're going to share in a little bit, about how to actually use that data to make better management decisions at your library. So there's going to be even more powerful tools that are going to be accessible to smaller and smaller libraries. I know there's a myth out there that a lot of these tools that are coming out are just for big libraries who have thousands and thousands of people coming through their doors every day. But these tools are getting better and better, and they're easier and easier to use for smaller libraries, which is a huge gift to us if you think about it at the end of the day. Because no matter what we do and how well we do it, word of mouth will only get us so far. We've also got to tell our story on our website, on our Facebook page, through our annual reports to the community, and these are the kind of tools that are going to help us do that. So before we looked at that public participation kind of spectrum in a linear way, but really when we think about this, it's not a special project or step one in your planning process, it's your new mindset that you're going to be continuously working through. So looking at, how you're collaborating with people and empowering people, and then making sure you're telling that story also, excuse me, that it's not just about doing this work and making sure good things are happening, but we also have to remember the old adage, if a tree fell in the forest and no one was there to hear it, would anything have happened? This whole model of community engagement means people have a front row seat to see you doing the good work, but it doesn't mean that you can stop telling your story. We still have to do that work to get the word out about what we're doing, because no matter how good community engagement is on our end, there's still going to be people in our community that are disconnected from that, and that might be okay. Maybe they don't want to be a part of a community. We've actually heard that in some places we've gone to visit and talked to them about what their hopes were for the future. Some people say they can't wait to be part of a community, and that's why they moved to this small town. Other people say, I moved upstate to get away from people. I like my isolation. I'd like to choose to be a part of things, but I'm not going to be there every day. That's totally cool too. But it does mean we're going to have to tell the story in a variety of different ways. Excuse me. So that informing and consulting, those phases, while they're low level of public participation, might still be activities that are absolutely important to creating the circle that tells the story of who you are, why you're important in the community. Word of mouth, however, is always going to be king. Oh, excuse me. Because when you're out there in the community and people are seeing the good work you're doing and they see that you care about what they're doing, that makes them want to be a part of what you're doing too. So hopefully those two things are matching up and the word's going to spread almost organically. So you'll see some of the most popular libraries in our system don't spend a bunch of money on PR. They don't have a PR person because the good word spreads through the good work they're doing. So before we move into letting you know a little more about the webinars that we have coming up, we just wanted to point out that this is about getting out and doing the work. We talked before about the Ask exercise, and we're going to show you a little bit about the Community Conversations tool from the Libraries Transforming Communities product. But all of that is about getting out into your community. Well, it's really simple to think about doing the online survey, or I'll call up some people and talk to them. You really have to be out in your community, visible to people, and doing this type of work. That does mean freeing up your time to do that. We know one of the #1 things that people struggle with is having enough time to do all the things they think they need to do. But the truth is, if we're rearranging our libraries over and over and over again, but we're not picking up our heads and getting out and talking to the community, there's going to be nobody to come in and use all those awesome things that we have and we've created in our libraries. So to borrow a quote from Elizabeth Potter, who is the director of the Phoenicia Library, who's also done one of the webinars in our series, she ended her webinar by talking about the need to go to the places in the real world, to go out and to be a part of your community and be to honor, in her beautiful poetic way, she said that we need to honor our community's births, deaths, and terrible losses, which is a super poetic way to think about just being a part of a community, that you're side by side with your neighbors, learning about what's going on in their lives and what's important to them. You'll hear her talk in her webinar about how she uses social media to be a bigger part and a bigger presence in people's lives. So she's becoming a part of the fabric of the life of her town and her village that she serves. So it's going beyond the traditional view of what a library can be in the community. It's really personalizing who we are and being very human with the people that we're so lucky to have the chance to serve. It's really an awesome time to be a public library because there's so many options out there of how we can play an important role in the people's lives that we serve. The field is wide open here, folks, but if we don't do the work to figure it out and talk to our community, we're going to, I think, miss a lot of opportunities to be the best we can be on behalf of the people that we serve. So I want to give you a little preview of what we're going to have to offer in this webinar series. We've had 4 libraries that have stepped up to the plate to share their story. Please excuse me. So this webinar series is going to be on demand. You're going to be able to watch these at your leisure because one of the things we hear over and over again is the time issues that library staff are dealing with, making the time to come to a training. We wanted to create as flexible an experience as possible for you. So all of these are available on demand and they're coupled with the resources that are mentioned both in this webinar and in the webinars specific to each library. So you'll see we've got 4 libraries, Red Hook, Phoenicia, Highland, and Julie actually did double duty for both Highland and the Ulster County Library Association, so I'll tell you a little bit about that. And the Desmond Fish Library talked about their do-it-yourself coding program, which is a replica of a presentation they actually gave at a Directors Association meeting that got a lot of buzz going, so you'll get to hear their story as well. But I want to give you a little preview of what you'll get in each of these mini webinars. They're all less than an hour. In fact, most of them are less than half an hour. At the Phoenicia Library, you're going to hear from Phoenicia Library Director Elizabeth Potter, who shares the story of her library's rise from the ashes. Most of you know that the library suffered from a fire a number of years ago. And this is not just about their comeback story in terms of a facility. I bet a lot of you have heard the news. They just won the Public Library Section Award for Best Building of the Year for a small community, which is crazy exciting. But we really want to focus on the fact that that's not the end of the story, and that's certainly not the whole story. So in this webinar, you'll learn how the library went beyond that capital campaign, both in person and online, to create a highly responsive, award-winning community anchor institution that's the place to be on a Friday night in Phoenicia. Then we've got Erica Freudenberger. She's the director of the Red Hook Public Library, and she, if you don't know this, was named a Library Journal Mover and Shaker this year, which is pretty cool. Erica shares the story of her community's participation in the first National Libraries Transforming Communities cohort and how this experience has benefited the community and also built support for the library. Erica is recognized as a national speaker on this topic, and we're so pleased that not only is she in our system, but she shared her time to tell this story. Because it's a story she's being invited to tell all over the country, and we've got her right here in the Hudson Valley. The next webinar we've got is from Julie Kelsel-Dempsey. Julie's the director of the Highland Public Library, and she also currently serves as the president of the Ulster County Library Association. And in her webinar, she shares why she was named a trusted advisor to the Mid-Hudson Library System's Increasing Circulation Incubator Program. She also talks about how her library bounced back from a loss. When she first went out for their building referendum, they suffered a loss, and she talks about coming back from that loss and how important community engagement was on that path to victory, which they did win last year. So new building for the Highland Public Library. She's also going to share a sneak peek of a very cool new thing. The Ulster County Library Association has worked together to create a mobile app to help meet people where they are. So the whole theme of Julie's talk is being outside the library and talking to people and going where they are and meeting them where they are, which is a big part of community engagement. Not always expecting people to come to us, but actually getting out beyond our buildings and sometimes out beyond our comfort zones and bringing people what they need and well as talking to them where they are. Our fourth webinar for now, and we're going to talk about that in a minute, is the DIY coding program from the Desmond Fish Community Library. This might seem like an outlier in our series here today, but the most important thing to understand about this program, as cool as it is, it would not have happened if the community hadn't asked for it. This is a community that asked for help in this area and a library who responded. So in this webinar, you can find out how the Desmond Fish Library ended up with one of the most innovative programs in the state, thanks to their community's interest and their community's willingness to step up and make it happen. So you can enjoy this presentation by Jen McCreary, the director of the Desmond Fish Library, and Pam McGlusky, who has one of the coolest titles possibly in all of library land. She is the Cybrarian at the Desmond Fish Library. You heard that right, folks, the Cybrarian. They share the story of how they got started, how the community approached them about doing this, how the community helped them get it off the ground, the community connections they've made through this program, and tips for doing something similar in your community if this happens to fit the needs of your community. So these are the first 4 webinars in the series. You can access all of those webinars as well as the resources we've mentioned throughout this morning at midhudson.org/engage. This is a page totally devoted just to this webinar series. And so we encourage you to go and explore and check out these stories at your convenience and let us know, is this the kind of thing you'd like more of? Because we've got another 4 libraries who are willing to tell their story if you'd like more. So when you get your evaluation, let us know. Does this format work for you? Is it helping you go further in what you'd like to do in your community? Is it helping you get a deeper understanding of how to do what needs to be done to make your library the best it can be as you move forward? And if you're saying yes, thumbs up, we're going to hit the record button on 4 more webinars featuring other libraries from around the system. We've got a couple of other things I wanted to point out to you that are coming up that we think can help as you think through engaging with your community and also just optimizing your library so it can be the best it can be as it's responding to the community needs you identify through this community engagement work. We've got 3 programs coming up over the fall. We've got Janie Herman coming back to talk about planning for program success in September. We've got a customer service webinar where you can view in 3 different locations around the system in October. And we have a very cool presenter, Sophie Brookover, who's coming to talk about social media. Because as you hear, and particularly if you're interested in social media, in the webinar series, the community engagement webinar series, Liz Potter from the Phoenicia Library talks about her social media policy, philosophy, and how she's got some of the highest engagement as we see in any library on Facebook today. That's large, medium, or small libraries. One of our smallest libraries is doing it right. Sophie's got some really practical tips for how to leverage social media to do some of the work that needs to be done to connect with your community in not the way that most libraries do things, which is pushing information, but how you can pull information and be a part of the community and be part of the community hub of information exchange on social media, which is, I think, a level up beyond where most libraries are thinking about how to use social media for the future of library services and their community. So she helps us take a look at how to put the community at the center of social media, even on your own social media channels. So this is our introduction to community engagement, and you've got free reign now to go and view the webinar series. We want to heartily thank the directors who are brave enough to be recorded for the webinar series. Not everyone is comfortable presenting and being recorded, myself included. So we just really want to thank Liz Potter at the Phoenicia Library, Erica Freunberger at the Red Hook Public Library, Julie Kelsel-Dempsey from Highland, and of course Jen and Pam down at the Garrison Library, the Desmond Fish Library. Their willingness to share and help you see what it looks like in real life, I think, is probably the most powerful thing that can happen to learn more about what community engagement means, how to do it, and what it looks like moving forward.